today. Last week, Susan, Wendy, and I shared about different prepositions or postures in relating to God. And we encourage all of us to live with God as opposed to living life under, over, from, or for Him. And living with God means to have a personal relationship with Him. And as the verse says, we are all created uniquely. So our relationship with God would be expressed in personal ways as well. So next slide shows that last month I shared about the 9 sacred pathways that show unique preferences in how we would connect with God. Our church that week was represented by 3 main pathways in particular. There was a group of naturalists who appreciate God's wonder through creation and the outdoors. Then there was a group of intellectuals who appreciate God's depth by learning new knowledge and insight. And then there was a group of caregivers as well that appreciate God's love through service to others with compassion. Folks, that there is delight when you connect with God through your primary pathway. And it may be particularly helpful in times of stress or when you start to feel distant from God to return back to those primary pathways. Today, I want to reiterate that we don't just have one pathway only. A lot of us might have 2 or 3 main pathways. I myself am a naturalist, a contemplative, and an enthusiast. I want to encourage us to grow by exploring pathways that are not dominant to us. This can be a way where we can become more well-rounded in our spiritual maturity, since Jesus demonstrates all 9 pathways. So one way to grow is to explore and consider balancing the pathways that complement each other along 3 different continuums. So the first continuum shows the intellectuals on the thinking end of things, and then there are sensates and enthusiasts on the experiencing end of the continuum. And they balance each other because one side goes deeper in knowledge, and the other side will go deeper with emotional connection. Where do you naturally fall along that first continuum? For me, I'm kind of in the middle, but definitely more towards the right. I love to connect with God through enthusiastic worship. I love to praise and give thanksgiving and really pour out my heart to God with freedom and authenticity. But I also have an intellectual side in which I can use my critical thinking skills. And really, the more I study and learn about God, the more I'm amazed at His vastness of how He's working. The next continuum shows the structured style of the traditional pathway, complementing the fluid styles of the naturalist pathway. For me, I am definitely stronger on the right side of this continuum because I am a naturalist at heart. I am always rejuvenated with God's peace, joy, and strength whenever I'm outdoors. And in nature, you never know what to expect because things are constantly changing depending on fluctuations in weather, seasons, or life cycles. So I appreciate the adaptability and the creativity that pathway also reflects. Whereas in contrast, I actually bristle when I'm faced with rigid ways of doing things. I get bored and frustrated when things are done the same way over and over and over again. Now don't get me wrong, I do appreciate predictable routines, and I insist on planning ahead. But I intentionally I intentionally apply variety into my plans and routines. So the traditional pathway is definitely one area that I struggle with more. And I think that I would learn really well by talking with a traditional person to better understand how they use that pathway to connect deeply with God and to be inspired to grow in that regard. The final continuum here is showing the balance between solitude and community. And we think we can all agree that it's important to have a bit of both. This time, I lean more towards the left side, and particularly more with the contemplative pathway, in the sense that I like to connect with God through quiet reflection and adoration of God. More so than the ascetic pathway that focuses on sacrifice or self-denial. But F3C is a great place for me to learn community. And in terms of my caregiving, I've learned that I express it well through offering quality time to encourage and build up the people that God has put into my life, both in and out of the church. So which side of these three continuums do you prefer in your approach to God? Now, just as the Bible verses from 1 Corinthians 12 said today, we're all created uniquely. And we make up different parts of the same body of Christ. So we all have different pathways. And even if some of us share the same pathway, we probably express that pathway in different ways. So let's learn from each other so we can grow more well-rounded and balanced in our walk with God. So we'll break out into small groups of maybe 2 or 3 people. Okay? And this is time, pair up with someone who's on the other side of the continuum from your primary pathway. Okay? So if you're an intellectual, try to pair up with a sensate or an enthusiast. If you're a naturalist, try to join with a traditionalist. If there's not enough people here that represent the exact opposite, right, then try to find somebody still on the opposite side of the continuum, but in the parallel continuum. So, for instance, if you're a caregiver and you can't find an ascetic or contemplative, then go up to find an intellectual or a traditional to discuss. Now, for some of you that knew your primary pathway, then you have it written on little Post-it notes. For those of you who aren't sure, try to kind of pick one, see which one kind of jumps out at you naturally in the ways that you prefer to, work with God or just in the world in general. And then that helps to kind of walk around, mingle, and try to find a pair to complement your pathway. So once you have a group of 2 or 3 max, then you can discuss these 2 questions in your small group over the next 10 minutes. So first, share about how you, with your primary pathway, will connect with God best. And then share, once you've heard from all the different pathways represented in your little group, then you can share maybe what's meaningful or inspirational about the other pathway, the non-dominant pathway, that you could learn from them. Any questions? No? All right. Mingle!